You know, folks, I got to be dead honest with you. I almost set this next one out. I said to myself, you know, some things are just really awkward to talk about, and some things are just pretty embarrassing. And I'm always saying there's good people here in Tennessee. Don't judge us all by a few. There's some really good people here that are working hard to make a change. And it gets harder and harder to say that because guys like Gino Bulso just keeps making headlines with absolute ridiculous shit. But before we get to Gino Bulso, I want to make a point here, and I want to show you guys an older clip. This is a clip of Congressman Tim Burchett. When he was asked about gun violence, his words was, "You can't fix it." I'm sure a lot of you remember it, but for those of you that don't, take a look at this.
3 precious little kids lost their lives, and I believe 3 adults, I believe it is. And the shooter, of course, lost their life too. So it's a horrible, horrible situation, and we're not going to fix it. Criminals are going to be criminals, and my daddy fought in the Second World War, fought in the Pacific, fought the Japanese, and he told me, he said, buddy, he said, if somebody wants to take you out and doesn't mind losing their life, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do about it.
So yeah, when it comes to protecting our children in school, their answer is, we can't fix it. I mean, my daddy said that, you know, even if man's gonna hurt you, gonna hurt you. That's the hill that people like Tim Burchett is willing to die on. He has no problem going down in history as being the buffoon that said that. And Gino Bulso here in Tennessee has no problem being the buffoon that stands up and says first cousins should be allowed to marry. Take a look at this.
So there's an additional risk, but it's not as significant as some might otherwise be led to believe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move to table this amendment that would allow first cousins to marry.
And the fact of the matter is that unless anyone in this body can articulate a compelling interest to deny a male first cousin from marrying a male first cousin, this bill demonstrably violates Obergefell, and we should vote it down.
Representative Jernigan.
Well, I can say this. It's outlawed already. It's criminal in Texas. It's already outlawed in the states, and those have not been struck down by the courts. So apparently there is some kind of interest somewhere.
And if you think it can't get worse, it does. Take a look at this.
And my grandfather was named Antonio DeLuciano. And they settled in Lorain, Ohio, right south of Lake Erie, next to Cleveland. And they were first cousins, but they couldn't get married in Ohio. So back in 1924, they actually came down to Tennessee to get married. So, but for the existence of the current law, I would not be here. But despite that, I think it's good legislation, and I intend to support it.
There's an opening there. Isn't there?
All right, Leader Lamberth, you're up. Teed up. I'm not real sure what to say after that.
The first thought that went through my head when I saw that is exactly what Antonio Parkinson here in Tennessee had to say. He took the words right out of my mouth. Check it out.
Man, bro, look, man, I don't know how, all I can say is it's ballsy. It's really, really ballsy to fight to keep, cousins, fight for cousins to get married, first cousins to get married in state law. So that's.
Any Saturday Night Live is going to pick it up?
I'm afraid so. I'm afraid he's going to break the internet again. So, yeah.
So yeah, he's absolutely right. He probably is going to break the internet and once again make Tennessee a laughingstock. People will look down here and say, see, them hillbillies marry their cousins. I mean, we can't stand up for kids and their safety in school. And when it comes to that, they can't fix it. But if you got the hots for your first cousin, well, Gino Bulso's the guy for you, buddy. He will go to bat for your right to marry your cousin. It is so humiliating and it's so embarrassing, and it's just over the top ridiculous. But it reminded me of when I was growing up and I first started to understand what stereotypes are and how they're used to mock and humiliate people, and how they're also used by people who wants to grift and get rich. And I know a lot of people in my part of the world love Jeff Foxworthy. They love his comedy. And I'm not here to bash Jeff Foxworthy because, yeah, he's made me laugh a whole lot. But I remember back when I was younger, in the early 90s, I got that cassette tape, Jeff Foxworthy, You Might Be a Redneck. And I remember listening to it, and I laughed all the way through it. Thought it was the funniest shit I ever heard. And I took it to my uncle, and I played it for him. And my uncle sat there and laughed along with me. And then he got into the whole jokes about you might be a redneck if. And he starts off and he's like, if you ever cut your grass and found a car, you might be a redneck. Well, me and my uncle both laughed at that because my papa's truck was buried in the kudzu out back, Then he says, if you walk your kid to school because you're in the same grade. And I noticed my uncle stopped laughing. And then he said, if you go to the family reunion to meet women. And then my uncle just reached over and hit stop. And I was like, what are you stopping it for? That was funny. He's like, no, it's not. He's like, now he's just getting into the same old stereotypes that have kept people like us dumbed down for years. And I was like, but it was funny. He said, yeah. He said, you know what? He said, if he cracked that joke in mine and your presence, he said, we could laugh at it. He said, but when he takes that joke around the world, people are laughing at us because that's how they view us in other parts of the world. In my uncle's own words, they just view us as a bunch of cousin fucking hillbillies. That was his words. And I began to realize that a lot of times, people will crack jokes like that, and we're all guilty of laughing at it, and we don't realize that it's okay if you're laughing with us, but it's not okay when you're laughing at us, and it's also not okay when that just becomes the stereotype, and that's how people views people in your part of the world. It just keeps everybody ignorant. It keeps everybody stupid. And now we have congressmen standing up and going to bat with all the problems we have in the world, with all the issues we're facing, with all the struggles that people in Tennessee struggles with every day to put food on their table, to make sure their mom and dad can get the health care they need. Republicans will go to bat and they'll fight against them every step of the way when it comes to those things and stand back with the audacity of Tim Burchett and go, I can't fix it. But no, wait a minute, hold on, first cousins should be allowed to marry. I'm going to go to bat for that. That's the hill I'm going to die on, is letting first cousins marry. And when you do that in Tennessee, it just goes right back into a redneck joke. It just turns us right back into a laughing stock on the world stage. And I say all the time, I can't blame anyone for not wanting to stop if you're passing through. And like I've said before, it gets harder and harder to say, hey, y'all come back, because we have morons like that. But I'm going to close with this clip because we do have good people here in Tennessee calling out the bullshit of Gino Bulso. And one of them's name is Justin Jones, and he does not care at all to stand his ground and put this guy in his place. So take a look at this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't hear a question, but while my colleague's statement was eloquent, what he was essentially saying was that Justin is an uppity Negro. How dare he point at the speaker and call a lie a lie? How dare he act like he's your equal? How dare he come before this body and not bow down? That's what Representative Bulso was saying, and that's what he told me on the elevator 2 days ago when he tried to incite violence against me and got in my face and said, "You are a damn disgrace." And I said, "Representative Bulso, hold on, let me pull up my phone. Can you say that again?" And he cowered and chose not to repeat it because he did not want the world to see what a disgrace he is for Williamson County voters.
So the next time you see a headline here in Tennessee that makes you roll your eyes or makes you burst out laughing, just remember we do have good people like Justin Jones who's going to bat for us and who's standing up and speaking truth to power. And like he said so many times, he has one of my favorite quotes. He says, we're moving away from the audacity of hope, and we're hoping for audacity. And that's what we want more of here in Tennessee. We're going to keep hoping for audacity, and we're going to keep standing up to the bullshit of Gino Bulso. He's got the perfect last name. He really does. It's very easy to pull a Trump here and just sit and go, Gino bullshit, Gino bullshit. As a matter of fact, I think I will just adopt some of his rhetoric. You know why? Because Donald Trump will sit and he'll repeat the same shit over and over and over, and it works with his crowd. It works when he said, Sleepy Joe, you crooked Hillary. It works when he says that shit. So maybe we'll just take his own ridiculous rhetoric and we'll just use it for the greater good. And we'll just Gino bullshit from here on out. I don't know if I'll ever be able to call him Bulso again because, man, that was some bullshit.